Well, thank you everybody for coming out to Malvern Books tonight and enjoying novel night with us. I'd like to remind you, as I just said, all the fiction in the store is 20% off tonight. The authors have copies of their books here. You know, if you buy them, I think if you ask them, they'll sign them for you.
That's extra.
That's something you have to work out between you and the author. I don't get a cut. But, so, our first reader tonight is Jonathan Woods. Jonathan lives a pulp fiction existence in the Texas Hill Country. He is the author of Bad Juju and Other Tales of Madness and Mayhem, A Death in Mexico, Phone Call from Hell, and Other Tales of the Damned, and Kiss the Devil Goodnight. His new novel, Hog Wild, is forthcoming. Jonathan?
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here at Malvern Books on a rainy, November night. Yes, November night. Just so you know, since I was a kid, I always dreamed of becoming a writer, and then I became an attorney. Everybody hated me for years, but ultimately I said, screw that, I'm going to become a writer, and in 2003 I gave up my law practice and started writing, and 7 years later my first book, Bad Juju, came out, and it was in the Texas Book Festival and won a little prize called the Spinetingler Award for Best Crime Short Story Collection. And since then I've been writing a book about every couple of years. My newest book I just finished, called Hog Wild, set here in Texas, about feral hog hunting, a subject near and dear to my heart, although I've never been a hunter. And let me just say that I wear this hat with the Paris Review logo on it because I'll probably never ever be published in the Paris Review. I write pulp fiction. And I'm going to read to you two things. One is a very short piece from my collection, Phone Call from Hell. And then the second piece is an excerpt from my newest novel, Kiss the Devil Goodnight. So here we go. The title of this little piece, which is, I guess you could call it flash fiction. It actually appeared first on the website of a venerable book publisher in New York. What's the name of that book publisher? Sorry, I'm having a senior moment. Anyway, I'll think of it. Anyway, it's called A Bad Day for Barbecue. Zhao Li, first female owner of Golden Barbecue, stood in the restaurant's doorway. Her crafty eyes watched the morning traffic on Hollywood Road in the heart of Hong Kong Central. Behind, massive apartment blocks rose up the slope of Victoria Peak like giant Lego sculptures. Rain clouds of a winter cold front roiled above. Mostly antique shops and galleries inhabited Hollywood Road, with an occasional sly upscale restaurant or a bar here and there. As the landlords hiked the rents, the galleries were moving away. Life was ever changeable, thought Zhao. Golden Barbecue had been at its location for 5 generations, offering succulent, mouth-watering barbecue to its clientele. In the window, a suckling pig, a dozen pressed ducks, and a great brace of geese, favored for their fatty flesh, hung from metal hooks. Zhao waved at Hamish Macbeth, walking his pit bull Doris, as he did every morning and evening. "Lei Hao," she said. "Hello, how are you?" Hamish waved back. He was a regular at Golden Barbecue. Between mouthfuls of limoncello glazed pork ribs, He had told Jow he worked in security for a Scottish bank. Doris, a magnificent brown and white short-haired creature, loped at the end of a chain leash. Hamish had assured Jow Doris was as gentle as Jow's grandmother, who had died in the Revolution. Tomorrow, the year of the snake arrived, with pageantry and feasting to honor both gods and ancestors. Jow's oldest customers would expect very special barbecue. For her most venerable customer, Mr. Chow, owner of a red Maserati and a condominium on the Peak, Jow had decided upon a most finger-licking treat. On New Year's Eve, a yellow fog consumed the city, sending cold, squid-like tentacles down Hollywood Road. Jow's nephew, Ang, a thug and heroin addict, crouched in a stinking alley. Late-night footsteps of man and beast approached. Doris and her master loomed out of the mist. Ang sprang upon them, blackjack crashing down on Hamish's skull. Hamish, cold-cocked, collided with the pavement. A chloroform-soaked rag went over Doris's nose. The dog went limp. Rolling the dog into an old blanket, Ang raced down the alley to the rear entrance of Golden Barbecue, already closed for the evening. In the kitchen, he hog-tied and muzzled the beast and placed it on a work table as instructed by Jow. Returning to his filthy tenement, Ang shot up and dreamed he was an emperor of the Ming Dynasty, sleeping on silk sheets as soft as a concubine's skin. Hamish awoke in semi-darkness in a hospital bed, his head pounded like a pylon being driven into the mud of Hong Kong Harbor. A figure crossed his line of sight, bringing the scent of perfume. "Awake now?" said a female voice. The first light of the first day of the year of the snake crept through the window, revealing a Chinese woman with two gold-capped teeth and working girl eyes. The name tag on her nurse's uniform read, Poon Tang, RN. "You brought here last night, unconscious," she said. "Lie still." Next moment, her uniform dropped to the floor like a molted skin. Starker, she climbed into Hamish's bed. Poon make better. "Where's Doris?" Hamish demanded. A revelation flashed in his mind. He knew exactly where Doris was. He remembered, over the last several days, Jow's hungry eyes lingering too long on her, judging the mouth-watering effects of tomato versus mustard barbecue sauce slathered on the dog's slow-cooking ribs. "I've always dreamed of falling under the spell of a nymphomaniac nurse, but I'll have to take a rain check," Hamish said, pushing Poon aside. He jumped into his clothes. In the street, he hailed a cab, found Golden Barbecue's alley door unlocked. In the kitchen, Jow stood with knife raised to pierce the pit bull's heart. Grabbing her upraised hand, Hamish plunged the blade deep into Jow's chest. "Die like a dog," he said. She crumpled to the floor. In seconds, Doris was free. Groggy but joyful, she licked Hamish's cheeks. An hour later, Golden Barbecue's star chef arrived to find no dog to prepare for Mr. Chow. Before him yawned the abyss of lost face. At his feet, Jow's still-warm corpse. He poured a whiskey and drank it in a single gulp, heaving Jow's cadaver onto the work table and honing his cleaver to a razor's edge. He went to work. The publisher, by the way, where that appeared, it's Acacia Books.
Oh.
in Brooklyn. I had a story published in an anthology called Dallas Noir, and that was my association with them. And they have this thing called Monday Murders or something like that, and you can submit flash fiction, and if they like it, they'll publish it. It was interesting because I sent this story in, and they deleted everything about the nymphomaniac nurse, but the rest of it was published. So. What can I say?
Thank God you shaved the dog.
So this is my newest novel, Kiss the Devil Goodnight. It's actually a tale of revenge. It's about a guy named Bill Derringer. He and his wife meander down to Florida to visit his Aunt Ida, or her Aunt Ida, I'm sorry. And it turns out that his wife and Aunt Ida had a serious relationship in the past, and they kind of resumed that relationship. And Aunt Ida, at the same time, is planning to do a holdup of a guns and ammo show in Orlando. So they pull off the robbery, and unfortunately, the two women decide they want to do in Bill, who's the protagonist, but he manages to escape, and the women run off to Mexico with the money. So 5.5 years later, Bill gets out of prison, and he's intending to go after the pair of women for revenge, but then he decides that he will instead go to Miami to a halfway house in search of his daughter, who was, because of his imprisonment and his wife's departure for Mexico, she was put into the
Foster care?
yes. So this excerpt I'm going to read, he has gone to this halfway house, and there's a woman named Marge who corresponded with him in prison, and they've sort of established a relationship. There's also another woman named Jane who is in the halfway house for committing manslaughter for running over her husband with a rental car. So this is a scene where Bill Derringer, the hero, is concerned about what's happening with Marge, because Marge, he has found out, is dying of cancer. When Marge didn't answer the phone the second time, I went nutsoid. Little black bugs crawled over my skin, between my toes, inside my navy blue low-rise nylon jockeys. I scratched like crazy, rolled around on the lounge floor. Luckily, there were no witnesses. My mouth went dry. Finally, I went upstairs and into the bathroom and masturbated with the door closed, but it didn't help. Why wasn't Marge answering my phone? She promised we'd get together today. Something bad had happened. Terrorized, I hopped a cab. There, I shouted, pointing wildly as the cab driver barreled down Marge's street. I leaped from the taxi, throwing a 20 at the driver's outstretched hand. Across the curb lawn and sidewalk, I sprinted onto the blacktop parking area, heading for the gray metal door to the stairs leading up to Marge's apartment. The door pushed open, and a man in a coal black suit came forth. In one hand, he held a leather medical bag. His face was turned away, hidden in the shadow of a black fedora. Then he turned to look at me. My eyes gaped in horror. The face was a skull of bleached bone from which fragments of skin peeled away. Empty sockets plummeted into blackness as deep as bottomless wells. Rotting yellow teeth cast in a demon doppelganger of a Cheshire cat grin. Dr. Death, I presume, were the whispered words on my lips. We'd met before over in Iraq. He made a slight theatrical bow before breaking into an antic dance step that took him skittering across the parking lot and up the street, disappearing into the descending dusk. I found Marge in the leatherette lazy-boy, ice cold, sleeping the sleep of the dead. I mumbled a few remembered lines from Ginsberg's Kaddish, written on the occasion of his mother Naomi's death. Strange now to think of you gone without corsets and eyes, while I walked on the sunny pavement of Greenwich Village, downtown Manhattan, clear winter noon, and I'd been up all night talking, reading the Kaddish aloud, listening to Ray Charles blues, shout blind on the phonograph, the rhythm, and your memory in my head. I'd read the poem back in Upawalla prison when I had nothing else going. When my memory faltered, I drew a sheet across Marge's Arctic cadaver. We'd shared an odd simpatico during our short involvement, and with a little luck, one of these days we might hook up again on the other side, if there was one. Finding Marge's purse on the coffee table, I ruffled through it, a brush entangled with strands of hair, a jar of green eyeshadow and a nub of reddish-brown lipstick, several sticks of gum, tissues used and unused, hairpins, and a tarnished silver locket containing a man's dark-hued face and a dried rose petal. Nothing of value, unless you counted the sentiment of the dude and the rose petal. The $83 in her wallet I folded and thrust into my pocket. She would have wanted me to have it. To ransack the apartment for other items of value seemed in poor taste. Plus, the longer I hung around, the more likely I would be drawn into the matter. As the minutes marched by with the obviousness of a ticking time bomb, I ran an ever-increasing risk of being discovered lurking on the premises, with the consequence of somehow being found complicit in Marge's demise. As a man with a past, I needed to avoid the dead and the dying like the plague. As I wiped down the apartment's various door handles with one of Marge's cutesy embroidered hankies, I noticed her car keys on the kitchen counter. Grabbing them up, I checked the stairwell. No one was about. Outside, I found Marge's old Wrangler parked under a flame-fringed canopy of a Royal Ponciana. The .38 caliber Taurus with a full magazine was still in the glove compartment, but without any accompanying spliff. I wondered where Marge kept her stash of dope, but it was too late to look for that. I thrust the Taurus into a brown paper bag I'd taken from under the kitchen sink. Dropping the keys under the seat, I rolled up the paper bag and tucked the package under my arms, heading up the street in the same direction as Dr. Death. Adios, Marge. I'll catch up with you one of these days in the Elysian fields, and we'll screw till the cows come home to roost. It was a perfect September evening, maybe 85 degrees out, a slight breeze, people strolling up and down, picking up a pizza at the local Domino's, a twist of crack from a tatted dealer, just passing time at the corner bodega, waiting for the next drive-by shooting. I walked down to Compass House. It was only a couple of miles. Jane was in her usual spot on the top front step. The smell of pot wafted on the night air. The sky was the deep blue black of a well into which I was afraid I might fall and never get out. As I trundled up the steps, Jane spoke. "What's in the bag, Bill?" "Nothing." "That's the way it is around here. A whole lot of nothing." "You're not depressed, are you?" I said. "Fuck no," she offered me her weed pipe. Sail away with me, Bill. "I need to do something in my room." "You mean stash the gun you've got in that bag?" I laughed, perhaps a little too shrilly. "What would I be doing with a gun?" I said. Planning to kill somebody? Right. Can I see it? It's not a gun, it has a bite? No. Well, can I at least look at your sandwich? What are you talking about? So let's go to the kitchen. You can get a beer, sit at the table and eat. I'll watch. You can tell me all about your day. I've got to go, I said. Upstairs in my room, I closed the door and hefted the chest of drawers in front of it. None of the doors had locks, and I didn't want Jane or anyone else popping in unannounced. I lay down on the bed with the Taurus resting beside me, my hand touching it. I was exhausted, but my eyes wouldn't close. I tried to call up a holographic image of Marge and her ironic post-coital, I can't believe that just happened smile. But the image faltered, then morphed into the leering face of Dr. Death. I wondered what things would have been like if Marge hadn't been terminally sick, hadn't chosen this moment to die. But there was no point to this speculation. She was a goner, and I was alive, and at another day end. I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you for coming out, and say la vie.